Well, right now, forces in Iraq preparing for a long-awaited offensive to retake Mosul from ISIS. That city is the terror group's last major stronghold in Iraq, and its loss would be a major blow to the group's territory, or holding territory right now. All of this comes as a new documentary on the rise of the terror group, Confronting ISIS. It premieres tonight on the PBS series Frontline. Here's a small clip.
I have been covering the Middle East for 15 years. For the last few, I have followed ISIS closely. Earlier this year, I was in northern Iraq, headed toward the front line.
This road takes you to Mosul.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, it goes straight to... I mean, you can tell there are no cars coming.
Joining us now, the filmmaker behind Confronting ISIS, Martin Smith. I'd like to start there. You've spent a great deal of time in the Middle East. What are your observations now? What makes this situation different compared to others?
Well, actually, you know, the coalition led by the United States is making some progress in military terms against ISIS. As you say, the battle to retake Mosul is imminent. We don't know if it's going to go off next week or next month, but ISIS will be pushed back militarily in Iraq. But what's the focus of our program is looking at the conditions that gave rise to ISIS in the first place and the failure to really pull together a regional coalition that really has common purpose with the United States. We've defined a very narrow tactical objective: defeat ISIS. The other countries in the region, our partners, have other agendas, and they have other wars going on, other priorities. It's very hard once ISIS is defeated to see what happens next.
There's so much good footage in the documentary. I want to share a little bit more with our viewers where you come upon a town where ISIS was, and you talk about where the front line is and who our partners are. Let's go ahead and take a look at that.
So you pushed them out of this town. How far are they from here now? How far?
It's like 1,500 meters.
Like a mile.
Yes.
Do you want to go talk to them?
You can go with me?
خدای برنامه موسر زور پزحمت اویت دست امریکایی دا.
Who were you talking to there? Why do they matter?
The Kurdish Peshmerga are the best fighters we've found. The Syrian Kurds also. There are ties between the two groups. The Peshmerga in northern Iraq, the Syrian Kurds in northern Syria have been the best fighters, and they're going to participate in the battle to retake Mosul, and there are major force in northern Syria moving towards Raqqa, the headquarters of the caliphate.
But we saw there that they said they're not going into Mosul without the Americans.
Well, the Americans have been trying to rebuild the decimated Iraqi army, the regular forces of the Iraqi government. And he's saying that those forces are never going to be able to do anything without American support, and he's not willing with his forces to go it alone without Americans. The Americans provide air support, importantly, drones as well as jet bombers, and they want that. They won't go up against ISIS without that support.
It's a different situation inside Syria. In one way, we're talking about Iraq, and another way, we're talking about Syria. And one Saudi minister, a former minister, said to you, if you guys are going after terrorists, who's the real terrorist in the region? And he says, President Assad is the one that has killed hundreds of thousands of innocent people, not ISIS. Why would he say that, and what's that show us about the complexity of the decisions that we're making?
There are two battlefronts, really, one in Iraq and another and much more challenging one in Syria. And in Syria, if you retake towns and you ally yourself with, let's say, Syrian Kurds to help you take those towns, who's going to run those towns after you've taken? You don't have a partner in the government, and as long as there is a war, a civil war raging in Syria, you're going to have ungoverned spaces that ISIS can take and exploit. And so people across the Middle East say you're not going to defeat ISIS in Syria unless you can get Assad to come to the table, to get a ceasefire, to be deposed, whatever.
And the question is then, what does America do? We played a soundbite of the president, and he famously said, I was elected to end wars, not start them. How much do you think that very phrase really defines his foreign policy, and what do you think is going to be the biggest decision for whoever the next president is?
Well, we know the president has been extremely cautious. He got elected promising not to drag American men and women into another messy war. And as we say in the documentary, there's no war messier than the Syrian war. You've got so many different groups fighting there. So he's held to that. And he's not about to change in the time that he has remaining. Both candidates are saying they have solutions for this. They haven't articulated them clearly. Mrs. Clinton has talked about a no-fly zone, but now the Russians are there. You're going to go up against the Russians. It's a very difficult proposition. And Mr. Trump says he says it's easy. Well, it's not easy, as anybody seeing this documentary will see.
Well, all the more reason to watch it tonight, because it'll give us really an idea of what's at stake. Martin, it's great to have you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna.